Yeah, great. Thanks, Taurus. So I assume you can hear me and you can see my slide. Is that working fine?
Yes, I can see. Yeah.
Okay, good. So off we go. So you had sessions on Business Application Studio and you had session on SAP Fiori. So what does these what technology does a connection between those two topics? It's SAP UI5 as the UI technology. The UI technology to be developed in Business Application Studio and to implement a Fiori user experience. So let's talk about SAP UI5 in this session. My name is Oliver Greff. I'm product manager at SAP. Dealing with topics like SAP UI5, obviously UI technologies, and also IDEs for development. So you have a rough idea who I am. Now I just want to understand who you are. Can you let me know in the Zoom chat? Can you let me know, are you a developer or no developer? Can you just put in the Zoom chat? I see mostly developers. There's also some non-developers. Okay, I see we have a nice mixture. Very good. ABAP developer, technical lead. Great. So we have a good mixture, and I think it's good, suitable content I have brought. Very good. Thank you. If you're a developer, which IDE did you use? Coming from an ABAP background, using SE80, Web IDE, Application Studio, what IDE did you use for any developments you did? Okay, so I see a lot of SE80, so you're having ABAP background, but also the other IDEs, Web IDE. I mean, you probably heard about the move from Web IDE to Application Studio, and some of you have experience in several IDEs. Great. Good to know. A bit of Eclipse. Yes. Personal edition of Web IDE. So you've probably joined the session on Application Studio. And some of you even have experience in Application Studio. Great. Thank you. If you have developed Fiori applications, can you let me know the number of Fiori applications you have developed? 0 or more? 2, 1. Very good. So you did your first. I see 7, couple of zeros. So we're planning to develop 60. Okay, so that's bigger projects for Fiori Elements applications, I see. So again, we have a good mixture, and some of you have some experience. I see 15. Okay. That's great. And if you have developed a Fiori application, did you use the SAP UI5 Freestyle approach or the Fiori Elements approach? You've heard about that, this metadata-driven approach. Which approach did you use, Freestyle or Fiori Elements? Okay, I see a couple of Freestyle, using the wizard to create an initial project, but also Fiori Elements. Okay, I see both. I mean, you've heard in the session the use cases for the different approaches. If you want to be very efficient, then Fiori Elements is a good approach. And if you want to be more flexible to maybe implement your own design, then SAP UI5 Freestyle is a good approach. Whoops, sorry. Let me know, what's your opinion? SAP UI5 is great. SAP UI5 is super. I mean, to be honest, you can put in other options as well. I'm just joking. Both? Okay, that's great. Any quick opinions about UI5 if you have experience? No idea yet, so let's see after this session. Complex to develop, yes. There is a certain complexity, especially if you're coming from ABAP. for example? No idea yet. So let's see if I can change that a little bit in this session. No knowledge yet. Great. Too many steps in development. So we're trying to improve this with investing in SAP UI5 as the UI technology and also investing in respective tools. You have heard about the Fiori tools, for example, but that is a valid point. Yeah. Great. Thank you for your feedback. Now let's get going with the session. This is my rough agenda. So I want to connect it to what you have heard about the Fiori user experience, explain the value of SAP UI5, and then mention a couple of highlights and the roadmap of UI5. For example, SAP UI5 Flexibility to adapt UI5 applications, adapt SAP standard application, and cover a couple of topics, UI5 web components, for example, integration cards, and then also explain the openness and community aspects of SAP UI5. And then, of course, have some time for Q&A. So if lots of this is very new for you and you want to have a high level, one single takeaway of this session, I would recommend this blog. This blog is called, sorry, I'm struggling with my slide movement. So if you look at this blog here, it's called What is SAP UI5? And it is given a very high level view of the value of SAP UI5. I can share the link, obviously, and you have access to the slides afterwards anyhow. So the link is here in the chat. You see this is just a very short blog explaining the main value of why SAP UI5 is a good choice when developing web applications in an SAP or in a business context. And there's also a short video here explaining this in a very nice way. So if it's just one takeaway, take this, understand the value of UI5 and share it with your colleagues or customers. So let's connect it to Fiori, what you have heard about Fiori. Fiori, sometimes it's confusing. What is Fiori? Fiori is SAP's design system, the target design system, the visual design, the interaction design. But Fiori is also the user experience provided by SAP products. For example, SAP S/4HANA has a lot of Fiori applications, obviously. And it's about development tools. You have heard about the Business Application Studio. You've heard about the Fiori tools. So the tools to develop Fiori, tools to extend Fiori, for example. And last but not least, it's also about technologies like Fiori Elements and, of course, SAP UI5, the technologies to implement Fiori. So it's all those aspects if you talk about Fiori. And if we look more into detail, I think this you have already also seen, the evolution of Fiori. So we are sticking to the Fiori concept, we are evolving it. And you can see on the very right here, important aspects for the current evolution, Fiori 3, is consistency, intelligence, and integration. And especially the consistency aspect I want to highlight and how this is being achieved with SAP UI5. Consistency, if you have a business process which is going across several products, SAP products, or even non-SAP products, you often experience a break in the user experience. You can see here a number of products which SAP has developed or acquired, and looking at the shell design, the top bar, and on the left you can see there's quite a difference. And we want to provide consistency, obviously, so you don't experience this break. So we're striving for a consistent navigation with this shell header bar you see on the right being part of Fiori. So no matter where you navigate in your business flow, which product and so on, you always have the same consistent navigation way of calling up your user action menu and so on. This is obvious, but it's not only this shell header bar, it's also within applications. If you look at the launch pages, the home pages of different applications here on the left. There's Ariba, for example, there's S/4HANA and so on. They also look different for various reasons. And we need to strive for consistency. And on the right here, you see a labs preview of how an entry page, a Fiori Launchpad page would look like in a consistent way. So you experience the same experience. Yeah. So on the bottom left here, you see those square tiles you might have seen before in the Fiori context, but there's also other cards here, for example, list cards, analytical cards down here, all implemented with SAP UI5 and being used in different products. So you get the same experience, the same look and feel, even on different products, on different technology stacks. And we'll see how we can do this with UI5. So it's not just looking at SAP S/4HANA and they have Fiori and that's it. We want to provide this experience also in different products, on different technologies, or even on non-SAP products. And these are the Fiori principles. I looked at the slides you've seen in the Fiori session, and I think you basically have seen this before. So we are sticking to these Fiori principles going forward. There's no change. I think the only change we had there in the last few years is that some product manager decided that this pictogram here on the top right would need to be a different one, but the principles stay the same. And I think that's good because we are continuing on this journey towards a consistent experience. And how do we implement this experience? There's a number of technologies. So if you need a dedicated mobile experience, which is super fast on your mobile device, which has features like offline capabilities and so on, then a native mobile application is the right choice. And there's different tools to create this, like a bit like Freestyle and Fiori Elements, also for native applications. You can use the SDKs for iOS and Android, or the MDK for metadata-driven mobile applications. So that's native mobile applications. And on the other hand, there's web applications, which are implemented with SAP UI5. And that's what I'm talking about here. So let's look at the value of SAP UI5. Fiori helps to align the needs between business and IT. I mean, you've worked in projects. We've seen in the chat how many applications you have developed. So you'll definitely have some experience in how business and IT can work together. And you'll probably know that this is not easy. And we need the right tools and technology to enable this collaboration. How can, for example, IT extend or adapt standard applications in a way which is helpful for business? How can maybe even business, meaning non-developers or key users, change applications without having to launch an implementation project and so on? So this is a source of lots of confusion and challenges, which you probably know. And we are trying to help this situation with the right tooling. Now, if we look at applications, do we look at one application or two? Of course, then we need to still think about consistency. How can we access the applications from a launchpad and so on? How can we navigate? Where do we provide common functions like in a table, having an Excel export and things like that? But if we're doing not only one or two Fiori applications, but if we're developing 5, 10 applications, some of you are in that region, I've seen, or we at SAP, we are not developing not hundreds, but even thousands of Fiori applications. So we need to do this in a very efficient way. We cannot create lots of coding, then copy this or take some template and have more coding and another application with, again, lots of coding. So at the end, we would have a lot of coding. And if we need to maintain this, if we need to do changes, it would mean a lot of effort. So we need clever and efficient ways to develop applications, For example, Fiori Elements, you've heard about this. And also some clever ways to provide to you as partners or customers so that you can extend standard applications, right? You don't want to copy SAP standard applications to change them. You want to have some good means to do some extensions, like you did in ABAP, for example. So how can we achieve this? We achieved this with SAP UI5. You can see here the basic explanation and value proposition of SAP UI5. At the top, it says it's a web framework, obviously. It is for cross-platform development, meaning we have SAP UI5 not only in S/4HANA, for example, but also in ABAP on-prem platforms. We have it on business technology platform. We have it in SuccessFactors. We have it in Fieldglass and in other solutions. So we have the technology in all those platforms, so we can actually create this consistent experience all using the same technology. And it's for enterprise-grade applications. I mean, you're probably aware of other UI technologies, and there's always the latest fashion. And if you come from university, you might know about the latest trends in web technologies, and then there's Angular and React and so on. But there is a considerable difference if you're talking about some UI technologies and you're developing a Hello World application. That's great. But if you're working in an SAP context, you're looking for enterprise qualities. You're looking for example, accessibility features. You're looking for security. You're looking for internationalization, that you can translate your screens in different languages. And all these aspects with which you're familiar when working with SAP, you know this from ABAP and so on. You would want to have this for free automatically. And SAP UI5 brings that, right? And that's a major advantage, which is often like forgotten if you think which UI technology is the right one to use. Just to explain the difference between Fiori and SAP UI5. Fiori is the design system, the visual design, the theme, the colors, the interaction concepts, the consistency, and so on. And SAP UI5 is the UI technology. So using SAP UI5, you can follow the Fiori design. You have seen many screens according to the Fiori design, but you can also implement a completely different design, for example, in a freestyle way. You can see here a couple of other applications. There's a digital boardroom application. There's a tablet application for children to send greeting cards. There's a mobile application to share music videos with your friends. All of these are implemented with SAP UI5, but not following the Fiori design principle. You still get the qualities of SAP UI5, but you have different requirements. You are not looking for this Fiori consistency, which is obviously what we recommend, but you might have different opinions. Just that you understand the difference between Fiori and SAP UI5 being a generic technology. And I think I mentioned this a bit. SAP UI5 is a cross-platform technology. So the scenario is you want to develop an application once, and it's running in all different browsers. It's running on all different devices, being a mobile device, being a tablet device, or a desktop device. SAP UI5 applications automatically adjust to the screen size. You mentioned a list of products. On a mobile device, it's just you see a list of products. That's it. On a desktop, you see the list of products on the left and details on the right because you have more screen real estate. And it's running on all the different platforms and operating systems, be it cloud or on-prem. So for example, SAP UI5 takes care of different browser specifics. So there's no need to implement things like, if I'm running in Chrome, then do blah, blah, blah. If running in Firefox, then do blah, 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 because there are differences. So all of this is taken care of UI5. You can concentrate on implementing the business logic, and it is running on all these devices. And that's a big difference to the mobile approach I was explaining earlier. So, and as I'm the product manager for SAP UI5, I'm putting SAP UI5 in the center of everything here in this slide. You see SAP UI5 being used in different products. There's a long list. This is not the full list of products. There's a growing list of products using SAP UI5. And we have a number of tools. You've heard about the Business Application Studio, and there's more tools to work with UI5. The theme designer to change the theming, the colors of the screen. You've heard about Fiori tools. There's the support assistant in UI5, UI5 tooling, UI5 inspector to help you debugging, and lots more. The distribution, where can you use UI5? And I mentioned cloud platforms, I mentioned ABAP, Java platforms, HANA XS. You can locally download SAP UI5 or have it available on any for any cloud solution of SAP. And different environments, I mentioned the browsers, and I mentioned different operating systems. So the same UI5 application can run in all these environments. And there's a number of sources for information if you want to learn about SAP UI5. So the most obvious one. Is there any question? No. The most obvious one, as you can see here, is ui5.sap.com, which has the documentation on UI5, for example, tutorials. You see here tutorials, quick start tutorials, very simple tutorials to learn how to implement the Hello World, or larger tutorials. This one has 30 something steps with all the UI5 concepts to learn. You have a lot of samples, for example. These are the UI5 elements. Let's say, simple example, let's look at the button. You want to understand how to implement a button in UI5. You have samples, for example, how to implement a button with a badge. You see the example here. There's a button here with a badge and a couple of other properties. You can change the badge value, and you see the effect up here. And how do I implement this? There's a button here at the top right, show source code. And once you click this, you see the respective view layout, you see the controller coding in JavaScript and so on, to learn how to implement, in this case, a button. And there's a number of demo apps also to understand full-scale applications. So ui5.sap.com is a good entry point to learn about SAP UI5. And there's also communities for developers, the SAP community, and also lively communities in Stack Overflow and Slack, for example, and open SAP courses, so free online courses to learn about SAP UI5, which I can recommend. SAP UI5 enables the SAP Fiori user experience. So which are the main areas? Of course, there's technology innovation. SAP UI5 must not be a proprietary technology of SAP, but we need to include the latest web standards to, for example, speed up UI5, make it faster, and follow what's happening in the space of web development. This is obvious. And user experience is also obvious. We are the reference technology of SAP Fiori. So SAP UI5 provides the latest evolution of the Fiori design to implement this consistency I mentioned. And the development experience is important. We need to provide the right tooling. You've heard about the Application Studio, Fiori tools. There's more open source toolings to work with UI5 to efficiently develop Fiori applications. And then there's one more area where we're putting more effort lately. This is what we call the adoption experience. How can we achieve that not only SAP S/4HANA or Business Technology Platform can use UI5, but also other SAP products or even non-SAP products, which are built on different technology stacks, not the full Fiori architecture and gateway and everything, but different technologies. How can they still adopt Fiori user experience, still adopt UI5 to provide this consistent experience? And I highlight a couple of these features here. And all of this together obviously makes up a modern and consistent Fiori user experience. So let's have a look at one of the topics. We call it SAP UI5 Flexibility. How can you change, adapt, or extend standard applications from SAP? This is a very common scenario. And if you're coming from an ABAP background, you'll know, for example, the bodies, which you as a partner or customer can use to implement changes. So also with SAP UI5 Flexibility, we strive for modification-free ways. So you don't want to modify SAP standard, you don't want to copy it, but you want to add your custom extensions in a way which is stable. So if there's an update of the standard SAP, you still want your custom extensions to run properly with that. And for that, you need the respective tooling, of course, to do this in an efficient way. And who is doing such changes? We see three different user roles. One is the developer. The developer would implement extension points in view layouts, for example, controller hooks to add some custom, maybe custom field, custom button, and things like that. There's also an end user we see in the sense of personalization. An end user might want to hide a field which is not relevant, or move a table column to the front because it's very important, things like that. In the sense of personalization, meaning just for the end user, right? And what is interesting now also, we see the key user. The key user is a person who has some technical understanding, maybe is writing Excel macros, but is not a developer, is not working in code. And the key user knows the business, knows many end users, how they work, and the key user can adjust a screen for a group of end users, for a business role, for example. And let me just show you how this works. If you're in the UI5 demo kit and you look at the demo app section here, there is a section.
Oliver,
yes.
you need to zoom in a little bit because the text appears too small.
Sure.
Yeah, 50 would be a good.
Is that better?
Oh, much better now.
Okay. So there's the section here on SAP UI5 Flexibility demo apps. There's one with Freestyle, one with Fiori Elements. So let me just launch this one here. And that opens up this manage product application, right? You see a list of products, and on the right, you see the details. Now imagine I have a specific authorization making me a key user. I have this option here to adapt the UI. I want to adapt the UI for all my end users because I know how they work. I want to tailor the app for their needs. So I can click here on Adapt UI. Now let's assume, I don't know, there's some technical product data here. Let's assume I know my end users, they don't need the weight. They don't need this, too complex for them. So I can remove this field. You see, I can remove the field and it's gone. And maybe my end users, they don't know the term base unit. That's too complicated. Let's rename this and just call it unit. Maybe the product width is very important for my end users. I know that. I know how they work. So I can drag and drop the product width. I hope you can see this via Zoom. I drop it as the first field so they can right away see this. And there's a number of more changes. These are just the very simple ones. And then I can save this and provide these changes to a business role affecting many users. So they get a tailored application. And I can do this as a key user. I don't need to talk to my IT department and launch a development project, work in coding and so on. I just did this via drag and drop. And still it's nicely separated from the standard SAP application. And once there's an update, it would still work, would still apply the changes I just did. And let me just see if I can put a little tutorial here, if I can put that to the chat, because basically what I just showed you, I have as a tutorial, and I just put this into the chat. So with 0 prerequisites, you can basically check out the scenario I just showed you. It's in the chat. So, and then once those user roles do changes, the developer is doing changes, the key user and the end user, they are all be added up and to bring the final UI. Let me skip this. So we were talking about the key user, but there's also the developer. You'll probably are familiar with that. If you have worked with a web IDE, you might be familiar with the extension projects, holding all the implementation of extension points or controller hooks, which are in the application. Using SAP UI5 Flexibility, we have the same concept, but an improved technology. So we gave it a different name. We call it Adaptation Project. It's the same. It's a separate project holding your custom adaptations or extensions, referring to the untouched SAP standard application. Now, what's different? The different are highlighted here in the text. The Adaptation Project can work with Fiori Elements and Fiori UI5 Freestyle applications. So no matter how the standard SAP is implemented, you can do the same changes in the Adaptation Project. And it says here, extend in many places. In the old approach with the extension project, or even with ABAP, if you're familiar with that, you need predefined extension points. So some application developer at SAP has to think about maybe a partner or customer want to extend in this place. So I put in a body, I put in an extension point and so on. And if this is not happening or not in the right place, not in a consistent way, not enough extension points, there's no way to extend this. With a new approach, these extension points are not needed anymore. If they are in place, you can use them. If they are not there, not enough, wrong place and so on, you don't need them. You can do the changes I showed you without predefined extension points. And I think that's a big advantage. And I have another little tutorial here for the developer scenario to see how this works in the Business Application Studio. I just put in here also a little tutorial, which is just uploading into the chat. You can try this in Application Studio in the BTP trial environment, how to create such an adaptation project. Okay, so both scenarios, key user and developers. Specifically for key users on BTP Cloud Foundry, we have a dedicated service. So as long as you're in the Fiori Launchpad and you have the usual, the Word file is not opening. Can someone else check? Is that not opening?
Let me check while you go on.
Yeah, it opens for me. Okay. Yeah. As long as you're in the Fiori Launchpad, you have the functionality I just described. If you're developing on Cloud Foundry, developing an own solution, a partner solution, for example, which is independent, you can still use the key user functionality I showed you with a separate service. So it's a dedicated service you find in the service catalog. You see all the details here, and it's available via these different models. So how to get this functionality also for your standalone solution you're building on Cloud Foundry. So if that is a scenario relevant for you, there's a couple of links here. There's also a video about the scenario I just showed you and the respective documentation. And the availability, of course, it's per platform. This SAP UI5 Flexibility, you see the ABAP platform here in the first column, and the end user, key user, developer functionality, those 3 user roles, and the other platforms here where we are still working, for example, for the on the adaptation projects. Good. So summary for UI5 flexibility, you can, in a cost-efficient way, change standard application, still benefit from upgrades. That's how it should be, right? And do this with intuitive tooling. And also you're independent of these predefined extension points. They're not needed anymore. So this is a big step forward when extending applications. What else? UI5 web components. Do you remember I was talking about consistency? How can we bring a Fiori user experience to different products, different technology stacks? And UI5 web components is our answer. What is web component? You see from the URL here, from the text, it's not an SAP thing. It's a standard in web development in all major browsers. Basically a way to define custom HTML tags. An HTML tag is what brings up some visual element on the screen. And with this standard, you can define your own ones. Okay, and what do we do this in the UI5 department? We define UI5 web components, for example, for a button and a table and all the elements we have in UI5. And if we develop these, let me skip this to see how an actual UI5 web component looks like. We implement them with the UI5 qualities. The UI5 web component brings HTML and CSS because they bring up something visual, of course, and also JavaScript. They bring up some behavior. And let me show you an example. There's the web components homepage linked here. You can see it's an open source project. You have some explanation, and here's an example. There's more here, code sandbox, list of all the available web components. There's complex ones like tables and all the things. But the idea is, this is a web component. It's a date picker. If your application you need to enter a date. You see, it looks like Fiori. It looks good. It has some behavior. You can toggle to the next month. Let me zoom a bit. Okay. So you can toggle to the next month. You can pick the year and do all these standard things you don't want to implement. You want to focus on your business logic. Okay, but this is not new. You know this from SAP UI5. The new thing is that you can use this date picker, this web component with this HTML coding, and that's it. No Fiori architecture, gateway, OData, on-prem, nothing, just HTML. And that's the magic here, right? Just using this HTML, you're getting this control. No big UI5 framework, anything. And that's the magic here. So you're using the UI5 web components. You see a couple of examples here via HTML on different programming models. For example, if you have a solution based on React or Angular or other UI technologies, you can still on top use the UI5 web components, bringing all UI5 qualities, accessibility, security, the Fiori design, and to provide a consistent experience even on those different solutions. And what we are going to do is, that's why SAP UI5 shows up here, we're going to use the UI5 web components also within SAP UI5, but that's more an implementation thing which is relevant for us. But this is an important approach to bring a consistent Fiori experience also to different products based on very different technology stacks. And another similar approach is the integration cards. You may have remembered when I showed you the screenshot of the Fiori 3 Launchpad, right? These different cards, list card, an analytical card, and so on. They are implemented with this technology, with the UI integration card. And let me quickly show you the integration cards. There's a card explorer here. You learned about the cards yesterday? Okay, I'll make this very short. These are the different cards you see, different card types, list, and so on. And again, like the UI5 web components, the magic part is how you implement them. There's a very simple JSON file here. And let me just scroll here. And I can see tip top. I just changed the JSON and you see the result here. Okay, this is not magic, but the thing is, this simple JSON file can be used on different technologies. Again, not only in S/4HANA, but if you have any application, SAP or non-application, it's easy to come up with this JSON file. And then the result is this card. So you again have a consistent experience, no matter which product, which technology stack is beneath. And that's these adoption experience I mentioned earlier. UI5 smart controls. You have heard about the Fiori elements, right, in the previous session. So how you can use metadata, these annotations, to drive the creation of a Fiori application. So no need to implement freestyle coding. And to do this, the SAP UI5 smart controls are used in this Fiori elements context. And you have heard this about this from the Fiori elements context. And now I'm looking at the same from the SAP UI5 context. You've probably understood that if you're using, you can use UI5 web components on a single UI element if you want to have a single, like the date picker. If you want to have a full application framework with data binding, navigation, and everything, then SAP UI5 is the right choice. And Fiori Elements is the right choice if you, on top, want to have this metadata-driven approach. And these smart controls, these metadata-driven controls, they can provide, again, a consistent functionality. For example, the filter bar, the personalization features, Excel export, and all these aspects which you want to look the same so that the end user can see, experience the same experience. Now, if you use these smart controls also in a freestyle application, that's also something we're looking at. This is a bit more midterm. Imagine you're developing a freestyle application, so you are very flexible. You have to put in your own UI5 coding, but then maybe there's some area on the screen where you want to leverage existing patterns. For example, you have a filter bar and a table. You don't want to develop this on your own with lots of freestyle coding. You just want to reuse it like a part of a Fiori Elements full page pattern. And that's what we envision here with this new library of smart controls, that you can use them in a freestyle context. And this new set of controls would also be independent of the OData protocol, because you can use OData, that's what we recommend. But as you can see here down here, for example, the SAP Health Solutions, they are using a FHIR protocol, a different protocol to exchange electronic health records. So you want to, the UI elements, like a table, to communicate with a different protocol, non-OData protocol. And that will be possible with this new generation of smart controls. So you've heard maybe about this flexible programming model in the Fiori Elements session. This is this flexibility coming from the Fiori Elements approach. And this the same flexibility coming from SAP UI5 is this one. It's basically mixing freestyle and metadata driven, mixing it in a way according to your requirements. There's more links down here if you want to learn about this. This is a bit more a midterm outlook. Okay, openness and community, just very quick. There's an open source version of SAP UI5. So if you are working outside of any SAP solution, SAP licensing, there's an open source version containing almost all SAP UI5 controls and qualities. If you want to have more details, I can recommend the community conference UI5 Con. So in the last 2 years, this was a virtual event, and there's also plans for different on-site events. And there's the respective Twitter handle here, and also a YouTube playlist of the last event we had in June. So if you're looking into details, more technical content on UI5, the latest news, I recommend to have a look at this YouTube channel. A roadmap, if you're looking for where are we going, I was just working on the latest edition on the SAP UI5 roadmap. So let me quickly show you. This is where SAP publishes roadmap information. It's the Roadmap Explorer, and you just type in SAP UI5 and you select SAP UI5. And then you, let me just collapse this here. You have a—
You'll have to zoom in a little bit as well. It's too small for people to read.
Okay, sorry.
Thank you.
So you have different categories here of the UI5 planned innovations, the controls, flexibility I just explained, open source like the UI5 web components. These are the Fiori Elements innovations. And then with each header, you can open up and you see what we have planned in the area of key user adaptation, for example, to be available in Q4 this year. And then you see all the other quarters. So you can drill down here, see more details. I just updated this, and as of tomorrow, it should reflect the latest status. So this is the roadmap of SAP UI5. And to summarize, SAP UI5 is powerful. I have to say this, I'm the product manager, but it's true. SAP UI5 supports consistency. I mentioned this 10 times, 20 times, I don't know. Consistency for the Fiori 3 design evolution. For the SAP UI5 flexibility, right? The way to adapt standard applications. SAP UI5 helps improving the performance of Fiori applications by including the latest technology innovations. And SAP UI5 is open. There's open source versions of it, and by using the UI5 web components and, for example, UI5 tooling, all of this is open source. We are opening up the technology and the tools to include other standard tools, things which are available and basically standard outside the SAP ecosystem. A couple of links for your reference: the community page, the roadmap, an open SAP course if you want to learn more. And that's it. So thank you very much. If you have questions, there's my email address. And I'm not sure, Thomas, do we have some time for questions? How do we go about this?
Yes,
go on, Thomas.
Go ahead.
Go on.
Yeah, we've allocated a little bit of time for questions. So if people want to ask questions, Mukesh will take them in the chat.
So there are already some questions in the chat. Oliver, maybe let me just go through the questions, and you can probably help answer some of those. So the first question is from Jetal Dasani. I think in your demo, you showed in terms of adaptation, you showed as in terms of you can remove fields, you can rename fields. So the question was, can key user change the unit from foot to centimeters or millimeters as well? So from metric system to general system. Yeah.
I mean, the key user can change the label of a field, yes. But if it's the value, it sounds like if you change the metric, it would need to change the actual value. So that is a change which I think affects the implementation, the backend, and so on. That is not something for the key user adaptation because it affects, well, the application. That would be then the case for the developer adaptation. The adaptation projects, that's the second tutorial I put in the chat, where a developer can actually change the application. Key user and end user, they would do, let's say, UI, more visual things.
Okay. And what is the role that is required for someone to actually do those kind of adaptations?
Yeah, let me just quickly get the respective documentation link, because there everything is explained. There's here it's called SAP UI5 Flexibility, all you need to know. And I just put that in the chat. And that's your, I'm still sharing my screen, right? Yes. Yeah. And here you see the respective documentation for end user, key user, developer. And for example, for key user, this is an entry point to the respective documentation. For example, if you're asking what kind of role do I need on ABAP platform to make me a key user, you need to go to the respective documentation of your Launchpad, go here, blah, 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 and then you will see the technical name of the role. And on the Cloud Foundry environment, it's a little different. Okay. And you can also see here the features and availability for end user, key user, developer, and the different platforms. So this is a good entry point.
Super. Thank you.
Okay.
So there is a question around the, sorry? There is a question around UI5 and the difference between UI5 and Fiori. And are there any UI5 specific developer requirements if someone is going for Fiori app development?
So SAP UI5 is the technology to implement Fiori. You can implement a different design with SAP UI5 if you like. If you want to follow the Fiori approach, following the Fiori guidelines, we recommend to use Fiori elements. So these full page patterns, I think it's 5 patterns. You've heard about this mainly in the other session. So then you are fully compliant, you are fully like following the standard patterns. If that fits your use case, that's fine. And using Fiori elements means you're using these annotation-driven, metadata-driven model. So you need to learn about the annotations and the Fiori tools to create them. That was part of the other session. If you want to have your own design, you can go for SAP UI5 Freestyle, create your own SAP UI5 coding. And that requires, of course, to know about SAP UI5, requires to know about a bit of web development and about JavaScript. So these are 2 different skills depending on which way you're going.
Okay. So there's a question around if I want to build my own Fiori applications, what are the components that are required?
Which components are required, right? For developing, we recommend SAP Business Application Studio as the IDE. I think, as you've probably learned in the first session, is that also Visual Studio Code is an option because you can install the Fiori tools, which is that part of Business Application Studio dealing with Fiori development, with UI5 development. These Fiori tools you can also install in Visual Studio Code. So either Business Application Studio on BTP, on cloud, or Visual Studio Code on your local machine. So this would be the development environment. And then if you're developing the UI, the Fiori UI, the question is what backend do you have? Do you already have a backend? For example, a gateway service for, I don't know, your product data, if you manage product apps and so on. If you have that, you can connect to that. If you don't have that, you can still build your model in your business application studio for UI development and then deploy it at the end to where you're using the application.
Super, thanks.
All of this is available for, I mean, the development, even if it's happening on BTP in Business Application Studio. Once you're done with development, you're deploying your app to wherever you want to use this. In many cases, this is on-prem, can be S4 on-prem, can be Business Suite or whatever. Yeah.
There's a question around, there's a particular customer who has not implemented Fiori in their system at all. Now the question is, can we convert or merge their app or website to Fiori, which will be built in SAP UI5 in the future?
Is this about a website or Fiori application? I mean, you can use SAP UI5 with the qualities I try to explain as a single application, right? And deploy that to your, if it's a business suite system, even a fairly old one, and use it there, right? Then the question is, how far do you want to go? Do you want to have just a single or even web page-like, very simple application? Or do you want to connect to your business data, to a lot of backend functionality? Or do you want to integrate not only one, but several UI5 applications into one entry point? Then it could be a task for the Fiori Launchpad. And that would be another thing you may want to have a single entry point into your application. So it's a matter of how much you want. The UI5 technology is UI only, is available for you, and you can create UI. Question is how much backend you need, how much entry point you need, and so on. Hope this helps.
Thanks. The question is, how do you add custom fields in Fiori standard apps or customize Fiori applications using UI5?
Yes, I can quickly show one aspect. It's part of the UI5 flexibility. So again, I'm launching the demo app here, and let me quickly reset that to the original information. Okay, now let's say I'm the key user. I'm seeing the standard SAP app. How can I add some custom fields? If I am in this section here, you see I can not only rename and remove, I can also say add field. And here I see all the fields which are currently available from my backend, which are available in the gateway or data service. So these fields I can add. Maybe I can add a couple of them. And you see I have them in my list. This is UI only. The fields were already in the backend and I added them to the UI. As key user, easy peasy, I'm done. If you're asking if you need a completely new field, which is also needed on the backend, so you want to create it end-to-end, UI to database, we have, as part of UI5 flexibility, first, let's say, a prototype, which works on BTP Cloud Foundry, and that basically has a little plus sign here. So you can actually add a new field. Then you will be asked for field length, field type, whether it's character, numeric, and so on. And it will actually create it down to the database. That's part of UI5 flexibility, but there's also the key user tools available as part of S4, which also has a separate like a configuration UI, not for the key user, but more like an administrative person, a UI, where you can define such fields, again, end to end and use them. So that's a different approach, not for key users, but that's also possible to create end-to-end custom fields.
Cool. So there's a question around how can we convert WebBin Pro applications to Fiori apps?
That's a good question. Let me try to reply two things. If you're talking to a designer, a user experience person, they would say, whoa, be careful with that. If you're talking about SAP GUI applications, they are usually fairly complex, lots of functionality, different user roles working with the same app. We take this and make it a Fiori application, a different technology. It looks too complex. It's not according to the Fiori principles to be coherent, simple, delightful, right? So that's what a designer would say. So what we recommend is, if you go for Fiori, you might want to think really of a redesign of the application, maybe to split a complex SAP GUI application into 2-3 smaller applications for dedicated user roles, which have only the functionality, only the fields for which are really required. That's what we would recommend from UX aspect. Now, if you're following the pragmatic approach, there is a lot of SAP GUI, and it's a lot of effort to do this, what I just described. So there's also a tool to handle SAP GUI applications. It's the SAP screen personas. And with that, you can simplify existing SAP GUI screens. For example, remove some of the complex tabs and menu entries and so on to make it simple. And then using the Fiori theme, the colors, right? You would have a quite good approach. It's still SAP GUI, but it's simpler. And from color perspective, it has the Fiori colors. So you're fairly good from user experience approach.
Hi, Oliver. Gaurav from Sonalika.
Hi.
I had sent you a question in your chat box. Could you please reply on that?
Hello. So the next question is around if someone wants to develop a Fiori app fresh, should they use UI5 or Business Application Studio?
Use Business Application Studio as the development environment, tools, templates, code editors, and so on. And use SAP UI5 as the UI technology. If you're coming from ABAP, it compares to using SE80 as development environment and using SAP GUI as the UI technology, both.
Cool. So there is a question on performance. How are the different flavors of UI5 with respect to performance?
Performance is always, I mean, you say performance, what does it actually mean? How fast does an application come up? Yes, it depends on many aspects. It depends on what's happening on the UI in the browser, there's the UI5 framework machine running in the browser and so on. That is an aspect. And we're constantly improving this. I mentioned the innovations. We're using the latest browser features. Browsers are becoming more and faster. So we're using this. We're making UI5 itself faster. And it often also depends on the backend, right? On communication with the backend, latency, network, and the backend performance itself. So if you're reading some business data. So there's many aspects to it. If you're looking for the UI aspects, let me quickly show you again, ui5.sap.com. And in the documentation, if you filter for performance, you see, for example, a performance checklist here. right? So lots of information to ensure good performance in your application. So good information here. Or here, speed up your app, right? There's more here, like little hints and so on, what to do in your application.
Nice. Thank you. The question is around deployment. How do you deploy or activate SAP UI5 Freestyle app on S/4HANA?
So once you have developed your Freestyle app, for example, in the Business Application Studio, you move your coding to S/4HANA, for example, where you actually want to use the app productively. And there's two ways. The recommended easy way is to use the deploy functionality in Business Application Studio. So if you look into the documentation of Business Application Studio, Fiori development, deployment, something, you will see how this works. So the coding will directly move to your on-prem system or S4 system. If it's on-prem, it will ask you for an ABAP package for a transport request, and then you have it in your on-prem or S4 landscape. This is using communication between cloud and on-prem, using the destinations in Cloud Cockpit and the cloud connector, right, to establish a secure connection between Application Studio running in cloud and your on-prem S4, which is, I think, what you're asking for. If you don't have this connection, maybe, I mean, it's secure, we recommend it. Still, if you don't have this, the simple way is you can always export the app in the Business Application Studio. Then you have a zip file on your local machine. The files and folders of your application is zipped. And in your on-prem system, you can import this. There's an SE38 ABAP report to import UI5 applications. And then you can upload it and then you have it there. Those two options I'm familiar with.
Thanks, Oliver. Another question around SAP transactions. Are all SAP transaction equivalent available in SAP Standard Fiori? If there is any mapping document with SAP, can we completely switch to Fiori instead of having SAP GUI?
Again, it's the question of what is Fiori, right? We have not converted all S4 applications to the UI5 technology. There would be a lot of effort and we need to completely redesign many applications. That would not be realistic. So we have some in the UI5 technology and some, for example, still in SAP GUI, WebDyn Pro using the Fiori theme. So they look like Fiori, right? And you can bring them together in a single entry point in the Fiori Launchpad, and you have a consistent experience, even though the implementation technology is different, but the look and feel is the same. And then you have different tools. I explained the tools I was talking about today for the SAP UI5 side of the story. And you have, for example, the sub-screen personas to work with existing SAP GUI screens. Did I really answer the question now? I hope I
yes.
Yeah.
Yes, you did, Oliver. Thanks. There's a question around CDS annotations. It seems that CDS annotations will replace the custom Fiori development efforts. Or in which scenarios we need to use custom Fiori development versus CDS annotations?
You're using annotations when you're following the Fiori Elements approach, the metadata-driven approach, which is what we recommend. Now, where do you put the annotations? Or where SAP puts the annotations, or you as an implementation developer. So where do you put them? You can put them in the backend in the CDS view, or you can put them in the front end in your Fiori project. Both is possible. This is local annotations in your Fiori application. Then it depends on which lifecycle do you want to have. You can make it part of CDS, then it has the sort of back-end life cycle with the CDS view, or put them as local annotation in your Fiori project in Application Studio. Then it's part of the UI5 application. So that's about the annotations. If you do a custom development, I think that was your question, you can follow both approaches. You can follow the freestyle approach, no annotations, but UI5 coding, JavaScript, and so on. Or you're following the metadata-driven approach, Fiori elements. And then again, for your custom development, you can put your annotations in the backend, or which is in most cases is a bit simpler, in the front-end project as local annotations. And that's what the Fiori tools help you with. And I guess that would be part of the session you had earlier yesterday or the day before yesterday.
Thanks. So there is a question around a Fiori client. It seems that people are getting pop-ups that Fiori client will be discontinued from Google Play Store and iOS. So is there a plan to come up with another similar app? I think that's something that was announced or spoken about in the previous session as well. It's SAP Mobile Start, right? That will replace that.
Yeah. Yes, I understand that you have a dedicated session on mobile as well in the next days. So that would be the best place to ask that question. My knowledge is that the Fiori client as the technology for a mobile application to work with the browser. I mean, you want to access specific mobile device properties like camera and so on, and the Fiori client is a way for that. So the approach which SAP is recommending is basically to go native, right? Not web applications, but if you really need dedicated mobile features, device capabilities, go native, meaning implement the applications natively, the mobile SDK for iOS, the SDK for Android, or the MDK for metadata-driven mobile applications, and then the mobile start as the native entry point into those applications. But the main thing is, in those cases, rather go for native mobile technologies, iOS, Android, and less web applications. They have advantages and disadvantages.
Thanks. There is a question on target mapping of semantic object. So how is target mapping of semantic object action different from business objects as data objects flow? How easy is mapping? Can we validate business objects against schema or DTD? I don't know what DTD means, but.
Let me be honest with you, I don't know. This customizing of Fiori Launchpad is a fairly complex thing, and I'm not at the latest status of how to do this. Sorry, I don't know. If you have a question, I can try to find an expert within SAP, but I have to say I don't know. Sorry.
No problem. So can freestyle custom apps be adjusted in SAP Web IDE?
Freestyle standard SAP apps, yes, they can be adapted. So that would be the extension projects, right? The classical technology we had for a while, which you can create in Web IDE to add your custom extensions. For example, the extension points or the controller hooks, those predefined extension points, which are in the app, hopefully. And then you can implement them. There's a visual editor, I think it's called Extensibility Pane, a visual editor where you can see the extension points and you can add your coding to this. Yes, it's possible. But again, if you're talking about Web IDE, we recommend that you have a look at Business Application Studio and check out the capabilities there.
Thanks. Maybe we come to the last question for the day. Question is, as you are from product management team, what is the overall usage of SAP Fiori amongst customer organizations and within SAP as well? As per my personal experience, it is quite low because of skill set challenge. According to you, who can be the best person to start developing apps and also ensure that it is secure?
So let me just, the overusage of Fiori as such. So you're not asking about Fiori elements, but you're asking about Fiori in general.
Yeah.
I don't have numbers, not numbers for how the situation is with partners or customers. And I have to say, I don't even have numbers within SAP, but I can say that the Fiori as such technologies, but especially the design approach, the consistent user experience stays a focus topic at SAP. We are investing a lot in the technologies. For example, Fiori Elements, to scale this, to implement Fiori in an efficient way, this metadata-driven way. So we're investing a lot to do this. We are investing in the evolution of Fiori. So it's not what you have right now, Fiori 3, the new theme, and that's it. There will be more. We are working on more an evolution of this. And I think there will also be some news and updates at the TechEd event. This year it's mid of November. So you will definitely have some sessions also on what's coming with Fiori. So there's a continuous evolution and investment. And again, it's the marketing term, but it's the fact also within SAP. SAP Fiori is the target user experience of SAP. And we are continuing the journey there. And it's not just marketing, blah, blah. I'm saying it is happening in the plans, in development, in technology, and in the product. That's what I can say.
Yeah, and I can add to that, Oliver. I've been talking to multiple user groups and multiple executives from SAP, talking to these user group leaders as well. And there is consistent and constant focus on Fiori as the UI technology for SAP going forward. You will find that more and more within SAP as well, almost all applications that are being developed newly are using Fiori as the UI layer. And you will find this more and more in the future as well. So with that, I think we've come to the top of the hour. I would like to thank Oliver for being so gracious with your time, insights, and engaging the audience and answering all the questions. Thanks, Toros, for helping us put together the entire series. And thank you, everyone, for staying through the 90 minutes that we had today. And I hope you already have a lot of insights on Fiori as a topic. We still have 3 more sessions to go next week. I'm looking forward to seeing you all in the next session on the 5th of October. Till then, thank you, stay safe, and thanks a lot, Oliver.
Thank you very much. Bye.
Bye.
Thanks.
Thank
Thanks,
you.